All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samuel?
It's Friday, so it's Gathering Storm from the Wheel of Time series, the first Sanderson book. And we are we closing it out today?
We should be. There's one, two, three, four chapters and a little bit of the epilogue takes care of Rand's storyline. That's right. We thank you for joining us today, where we're going to talk about Rand and how all his mistakes were just happy accidents. That's right. Won't that be nice?
Yeah, I got the right books up. I got Happiness Hypothesis, Why Buddhism is True, but then also Master and Its Emissary, which is the foremost expert on brain hemispheres and what can
I
go wrong.
I was just going to grab a shirt and then I saw this one and thought, well, this seems
And
disturbingly appropriate.
and of Boys and Men, which is basically all about how our young men are very disturbed because we don't know how to raise them anymore. Uh,
Well, and a couple of my
What
notes,
what what chapter does it start on? I was in the middle
uh,
of where I was reading.
42, which is page 654 in the hardcover first edition. I don't know if there are subsequent editions with different page numberings. Anyway, um, way back early on,
We're
you
gonna
made
try.
the
We will try to get through, but if we have to cut it
yeah.
short, I had to make us a little late, and Heath has to bugger out a little early. But I just got done at the colorectal surgeon's office,
Ooh,
and he didn't warn me before he stuck his damn finger in there, and then stuck a big giant tube in there so he could see. So that's my only complaint. Other than that, it was a great visit. But I am sitting on my special pillow right now because there's a reason. There's lots of reasons, but this is one reason why I know I'm not gay because I don't even like a hard poo. This was not fun because
no.
he had to look for a little while in there and oh, but
Um,
that'll be May 15th. So we might not be able to go that week. Although I should be good to record by Friday because it's on a Wednesday.
I
Uh,
am I am so glad. I was terrified when I had to have a colonoscopy about waking up because we have a mutual friend who woke up in the middle of his and was telling me about it right before I went in, and I thought, shut up. Just shut up. I don't need to hear this.
Well, when I had the when remember when I had the gut issues way back when I was like 19, when
Yeah.
we were still down there, or up there in Stillwater, I had a flexosigmoidoscopy, which is where they only go in part way, and they don't put you to sleep for that one. And it feels like you've got the biggest ball of gas you've ever had that's painful and you want to let it rip, but you can't. But when they drain you, oh, that's a great feeling. Uh, but I'm just setting expectations because we'll probably be, a few episodes into the next book. I should be good to record that Friday, but definitely Wednesday will be out because unless you want to do it right off the anesthesia, that might be fun.
Oh,
Uh,
that'd be trippy as heck. Yeah, depending
it-
on how you react to it. Speaking of poo, let's look at uh Rand's state of mind. Um, this is I mean, really it's right off the bat, and on the one hand, I felt like these two pages were kind of on the nose. But on the other hand, we have been bitching and moaning about the rambling wordiness of Matt. So at least Sanderson really is getting to the point. And you might as well, because here we are at the end of a very long series. There's not really any need to beat around the bush quite so much anymore. So these first couple of pages with Nynaeve trying to talk to Rand and uh and Rand just
no, no,
ignoring him and
you
being,
jumped the chapter.
oh, that's
We're
right.
still
This
in
is
Eret
Min.
Domon. Yeah, this is Min.
Min is talking to Rand,
But
and
but don't get me started about Nynaeve on that one. So when we get there, I've got a big
yeah.
complaint about that.
So we're in Rand's head, and all he can see is the failures. There's a line on 655 that uh um Rand no longer saw the colors of their clothing. He saw how worn that clothing was. He saw the rips in the magnificent fabric, the threadbare patches, the dirt and the stains. And this is going to be in in a credit where it's due. There's going to be a very clear and sharp contrast at the end when he goes to Ibudar and sees everything is different. Everything's better, even though it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
At
and
least on the surface, it's better.
there's something in the way Sanderson is writing the voice in his head that I think I know where Jordan was going with
Hmm.
the Loose Theron voice, and I don't know if Sanderson just didn't get it or if he's just not as good at doing it. Is as we're getting to this stage of Rand, where he's the hard steel Rand, Loose Theron is his emotion trying to get out.
Hmm.
Loose Theron is his inner id that's trying to push through the surface, where Rand is put is the void. He's in the void. Loose Theron is the flame. Loose Theron's trying to get that emotion out, trying to humanize him again. And I think it was going pretty well, but it just really clunky here. You know,
That's a good
he's
point.
very Schmiegelish right here. He's like we need to get to the list. We need to get to the list. Rain Man. That's what he's more Rain
You know
Man.
what? Yeah, that's a better way of
Wop Nerdate, Wop Nerdate. You know.
his ranting, Loose Theron's ranting about we don't know the names. We need to know the names. That when he gets into that, that is it was another one of those things that just seemed off to me and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I think that's it, is he's being very Rain Manish, and that's never really how Loose Theron is. That's not
Mhm.
quite the right voice for him. Um,
Yeah, he's screaming balefire, balefire, like hot water burn baby,
yeah,
hot water burn baby, hot water burn baby.
yeah. And what I think is supposed to be happening here is that crack in Rand's facade of what he's trying to make himself versus his true core, the good part of him that's still left, is I think this ties into when he talks to Tam about the why matters. And although all he can see is the imperfections, and although all of his conquering was clearly imperfect, it didn't go well. You know, it didn't. There were all these problems. You know, there were deaths that he didn't want to cause, but at least at the beginning, there was good intention there. And Rand himself, and thus the Tavarinness around him, was still balanced. And so overall, you know, the graph may have been bouncing quite a bit, but it was still trending upwards.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not.
Yeah.
And I think that is because
Well,
of
Loose Theron is the only humanity clinging in him because at least Loose
hmm,
Theron has guilt. Loose Theron it feels guilty about
that's a good
killing his
point.
family. That's why he went ultimately crazy. That's what drove him to make Dragonmount
Hmm.
was that inner guilt that just hit the point where he
Yeah.
couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, and that's going to pop back up here in the end when Rand's going crazy. And I think there's an element, a practical kind of application of that when he's kind of grumbling and ranting to Bashir. And Bashir this is on page 659,
Yeah, that
where
was my next moment too. Okay.
Bashir kind of laughs at him and says, um, where is it here? When you can stop a rumor itself, I'll get off my horse and ride a goat. You know, that's he's Bashir is still trying to be a mentor. He recognizes that although I am serving the Dragon Reborn, he's still a young man. He still needs counsel, and I think that's Bashir being Bashir. Um, and that's where he's always been a good point of comic relief, properly done because of his kind of flippant dark veterans humor, is where he comes, butting in, and uh
While you're
he
thinking of the right words, I didn't like that moment though, because I thought it was too much trying to insert comic relief.
mm,
I don't know if it's because it's like one of those wounds that starts off a little bit and then it keeps getting hit and hit and hit and hit and hit till eventually every touch of it makes you go ah. Sanderson's done that throughout this whole book, especially in the Matt chapter,
yes.
trying to insert comic relief where it didn't belong. And maybe this would have been better had we not had those wounds throughout the whole book.
Yes,
But
in a
it's very Jar Jar
vacuum.
Binks-ish. It's just jumping in Misa. And now if he had followed it up with one more little 2 or 3 line thing before the next one in wise words about rumors from Bashir,
Mhm.
instead of just the flippant joke, it would have been a little bit better, I think.
You know what? That's a good point because what I thought of when Bashir says this, I think in previous books with RJ writing, he would have said, maybe something along the lines of what I thought Bashir was trying to tell Rand here, but he needed to take the next step, which was, I don't know who first said it. I first heard it from economist Milton Friedman. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Mm-hmm.
And and uh, I think this connects on the next page. Rand has this inner dialogue.
Well, even
Um,
even something a little more simple. It says Bashir laughed and then he told a joke. It could have been tell the joke.
uh-huh. And
Bashir
then make the
laughed
point.
and it no, Bashir laughed and it trailed off to nervousness or something
Yeah.
because of Rand's expression. That
Or
that
he's
might have been, yeah.
or he's trying to make the point, he's trying to follow up the wisecrack. All right, here's the wisecrack. I've broken the ice. Now let me give you the wisdom, but Rand's coldness interrupts it,
Mhm.
right? He's not open to that right now. And you see that on the next page where he tells uh he shouts in his head at Lews Therin, go back to your tears, madman, and leave me be. To your point, the tears are the point. Lews Therin's still the one who can cry, and that's your shred um of humanity. And it made me think that although he looks and he acts like a man, there's still a component at his core that's the angsty bipolar teenager. One of the frustrations when you look back on your own teenage years, and certainly when you're having to raise your own teenager, is especially in those early teenage years where they're still trying to get used to being not a kid. Everything is the most everything. It is the best. It is the worst. It is the most awful. It is the crazy. Everything is extreme. And that's
Thank you,
why,
testosterone and
yeah,
estrogen.
not in the clinical sense, but that's why teenagers act bipolar so much.
Yeah, I have a
Because,
14-year-old, by the way. Everybody
yeah,
should know this.
yeah.
We've
So
we've had moments recently.
so there's still an angsty bipolar teenager in there, and you brought this up way back at the beginning, and I think there you can see that at several points here in these chapters, which is Rand had a phenomenal father, and you're going to see that at the end that's kind of what ultimately cracks this shell. He had a great father, but he still needed that maternal influence, and he only got it through surrogates like Nynaeve, like Marin Alver, right? Maybe a little bit from Mistress Luhan, the other main women in the town who he would have interacted with, but he never had that full-time maternal influence, which is I think why Moraine at several points here in his head, he makes a point that Moraine is always at the top of the list, which seems odd because of his at times animosity and certainly frustration with Moraine, but she was that maternal mentor that he so desperately needed. And I think that's why she's at the top of the list whenever he starts going through it.
Unfortunately, he's starting to act like her, which is part of the problem. Which is okay, we get us canceled. She's the maternal figure in his life, but the problem is he's acting like her. Uh, Acting like her before her revelation
Yes.
in book 5. He is acting like her when she is control everything around the
The
situation.
the archetypal blue who's got the blinders on because she's so target focused
Hmm.
that she's about to crash into the
But it's
mountainside.
also the archetypal overbearing mother. The overbearing mother controls
That's a good point.
everything about the environment around their child, whereas
That
the father makes the child be able to control themselves within the environment.
and who was
And okay, so
mother with a capital M.
disclaimer here. I use the term overbearing mother not to mean every mother.
Hmm.
Every mother has the tendency in that direction, but the extreme version of that is we are going to put a bubble around my child, and they
And
never know when to pull the bubble out.
let's get canceled further. Mother with a capital M at the beginning was Swan. And she broke the tower because she was being such an overbearing mother. And
Mm-hmm.
then Elida utterly destroyed the tower because she was the toxic overbearing mother, the totalitarian overbearing mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was Moraine who had the revelation and the change, and then ultimately finally started to guide him when he really needed it most, um, before she stepped out of the picture for a moment. Um,
Good way of putting it.
uh, I'm about to jump to the next chapter, unless you have more thoughts on chapter
Uh,
42 here.
let's see. Where did it end? Darlin, where am I on? Uh, no, I don't think I do. I thought I had a thought about him leaving Eridomon the way he did,
Mhm.
and I can't remember what it was. Maybe it'll come back to me. But
Yeah, and
I was in the doctor's office rereading this, so I didn't have a way to take notes. Though I did get a compliment. One of the nurses was like, "Gosh, I can't remember the last time someone had a hard book in the office instead of just flipping on their phone."
yeah, yeah. Huzzah for physical media. Okay, so jump to page 686. We skip over an Egwene chapter that we talked about last
No,
time.
let me bitch
Okay.
just about the intro to this chapter. Okay, so in the last chapter, we have him bitching and moaning in his head about
Hmm.
Nynaeve and Cadsuane disappearing. And then we have Nynaeve back in the picture as if she was never gone. And no
Yeah,
explanation about
yeah.
anything. There was no, not even a thought we're in her head. Not
That's a good
even a
point.
thought in her head of where, how she got back in the picture real quick. She's just there. There was a step missed in this process. A
Yeah,
step that would have been easily filled in because we're in her head.
there is something different. Um,
This is very much like the last episode of Game of Thrones, where all of a sudden there's an army there that was supposed to be gone.
there is definitely something different about the flow of the story in the first books versus the last three books. Um, just from the style of Sanderson, and we've talked about this, and Sanderson makes you appreciate that even though Jordan's books are ridiculously long and the series is ridiculously long, in hindsight, he's actually very economical with his words. And so things flow together. That's one of the reasons I think the story is, one, so impactful, and two, so memorable, that it makes it more real, so it sticks in your head more. I don't want to cross the streams because there's actually a point later where I'm going to do that. But we
Well,
talked
no,
about that Wednesday of
I was
the
about to say this
virtual
is
versus
this
the
is our from our
real.
last episode
Yeah.
because when something provokes your mind to think of the meaning behind something, it ceases to be just the words. And
Hmm.
uh and I this is something that in the middle of one of the Egwene chapters or something, Jordan would do this a lot in the earlier books, is just have a 3 paragraph segment from a point of view of somebody, and you
Hmm.
could have had Nynaeve leaving Cadsuane's little meeting that she we saw the end of that, or the
Hmm.
beginning of that, leaving that little meeting, talking, grumbling to herself about stuff, and then as she's grumbling to herself in her head, looking for Rand in Tyr.
Hmm.
And then we go to Rand, and Rand wondering where she is, and then we can come here, and then it would be all perfect right here. Because we already knew she was looking for him in Tyr. We could put together that it overlapped with him not seeing her, and boom, here we are.
Or a lot of times, what he might have done is, that that opening sentence to get your attention of Nynaeve arguing with Rand, but then before Rand's response, several chapters in her head thinking about how she got here and how she ended up in this argument with Rand, and then Rand's response of, shaking his head and saying no. Um, in that response, the reason I wanted to jump that page 686 is because to me, this ties back with the angsty bipolar teenager because he thinks he's being deep. He thinks he's doing a favor for Lan when he says down in the middle of 686, Rand Nynaeve said, her anger fading to horror, Lan will die. Then who am I to deny him that? We all deserve the chance to find peace. This is and I think I've referenced this before. I think one of the Jordan in interviews had said at times, "Oh no, I'd never thought of that. That wasn't a conscious, you know, reference or allusion to something." When someone would ask him, "Does this part, what was that influenced by this historical thing or this literary thing?" And he would say, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that. If it was, it was unconscious." Um, I think one of the conscious things that he did was play around with um, the Bushido code. You really see that with Shinar because it's so clearly influenced by the idealized Bushido code and the samurai. And duty is heavier than a mountain, death is lighter than a feather is a Japanese saying. It is a Japanese proverb uh, of the samurai. Um, the thing is, when Rand first hears that and he first acts on it, he's accidentally doing it right. Because the point of that is it's not an invitation. It's simply a statement of fact, and gird your loins and strap on your armor because it's going to be a rough ride. Later on, in the late 1800s to early 1900s, that led into World War II, one of the reasons the Japanese were so fanatical is because Japanese ultranationalists and militarists had warped the Bushido code from one of service into a death cult. I mean, there's no other way to describe it than a death cult.
We
And
see
that is
that with
why.
certain other ideologies
Yeah.
that
Cough, cough.
that do things on October 7th. But it, I won't say more.
Yeah. And so this is Rand now the sophomoric, where he thinks he's being deep, but really it's just sophistry. You've
I might push back on this a little bit. So finish your thought, and then I might push back a
well,
little
it's
bit.
it's it's what I've said before of the new Rand is the reason I use sophomoric is where that comes from is, oh, you've taken a philosophy class, you're a sophomore in college, and now you think you know everything.
He's full on Dunning Kruger right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's you didn't finish reading Nietzsche. You just read the edgy part and you're like, "Yeah, man." And that's how you're carrying on.
Well,
Um
my pushback here is that's also how Lan is carrying on.
this is true.
And
This is
yes,
where he learned it.
he found something new in Nynaeve, but the current Lan that's doing the Lan thing right now also has in his mind that he is protecting Nynaeve in the process. It's not about reestablishing Malkir for him.
Mm-hmm.
It's about Malkir, what Malkir represented. Malkir represented the border with the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And the border with the shadow is what prevents everybody from dying. And
That's a
she is the biggest everybody in his life.
that's a
So
great point.
his previous thing was he was just going to go die. Now he is going to go stop the horde. He is in a different mindset. He just knows he's going to die in the process. So he's already switched mindset. And I think Rand is saying, why deny him that? He knows what Lan thinks as a man. Rand is going to die for everybody. We actually get that in these last two chapters we're talking about, where he understands, yes, I'm dying, but it's for everybody.
Remember some of the last words of wisdom that we saw Lan the mentor give to Rand, and Rand didn't get it, was in Winter's Heart when he asked him, you told me the last thing you told me was to, if you love someone, push them away. And you're clearly not following your own advice, because this is now he's married to Nynaeve. And what does Lan tell him? Sometimes she's stronger than you are.
Mm-hmm.
And Rand didn't get that. He didn't understand what Lan meant by that strength and what Nynaeve's strength had done for Lan. And all right, so I'm gonna jump ahead, way ahead here a second, because on 697, when Rand finally tells Nynaeve where Perrin is, she asks, "What? Why?" And he says, "I have a debt to you for caring when I cannot." So he he doesn't get it fully, but I think this is showing, you know, continuing to establish there still is that kernel in there. But I also think part of this is, back to your point from a long way back at the beginning, there's still an element of him that is that confused boy who was raised without a mother's influence and wants it and needs it. And I think that's part of his continued connection to Nynaeve, and why he still lets her in when he has shoved almost everybody else away, is because of that. Um, the other interesting bit on this page here is when he leaves and Nynaeve thinks the storm there felt closer than it had before. She'd assumed it was gathering in the Blight. I think she's missing that Rand is the storm. The
Mm.
storm is around Rand in much the same way. I think this may partially be a callback to the end of Path of Daggers, because one of the things he shouts there when he pulls out Calendar is, "I am the storm," and he starts trying to wipe out the Sanshin.
That reminded me of my thought on Eridoman was the spoiling of all the everything
Mm-hmm.
corresponded directly to him blowing up Grindel's place. It was his basically fall from humanity there that caused all of that to happen
Mm.
right around him.
Uh, Next page. Speaking of his humanity, um, I love this thought here from Nynaeve, um, because I think it may be the closest Sanderson ever gets to writing women and writing the male female dynamic as well as Jordan did, which is, let's see,
What page is this again?
okay, it's on page 698 here.
Okay.
Um, blah 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 blah. Dang it, where'd it go? Ah, here it is. Okay, so third paragraph down, she's thinking about Matt condescendingly, because that's what she does. Rand was another matter. He'd been so much easier to deal with when he'd continued to act like other men, stubborn and immature, but predictable. This new Rand, with the cold emotions and the cold voice, was truly unnerving.
Two things there. Probably your thought on Rand, but a digression on Matt again, because this is Sanderson not understanding the situation. Because the last time we were with Nynaeve under Jordan's watch about Matt was she was understanding that he actually wanted to do well. And he was really a general and he was really doing all these great things. So, way to digress, Sanderson,
Yeah,
with that two sentences, two
yeah,
sentences.
I was trying not to go off on a tangent, but there's a point in here that jumped out at me that annoyed me. Yeah, it's right above that. where she has this rather disparaging thought about how she'd embarrassed herself standing up for Matt in front of the daughter of the Nine Moons. I feel like that is not something that Nynaeve would ever think.
No.
I mean, you go all the way back to when she shows up at the inn in Bear Lawn, and it's, well, you know, and she has that conversation with Rand of, I don't need to spill our business in front of outsiders. You
Hmm.
know, together
Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
united against her.
Yeah, yeah, the whole kin group, your first inner circle is your family, or your first inner circle is yourself, then your
Mm-hmm,
family, then your close knit community, and then it just keeps expanding circles out from there. And we see it with Matt when he bows to Egwene in front of Saladar. We see
mm-hmm,
it with Nynaeve when she defends Matt in front of the daughter of Nine Moons. We see it in all of these different places, and I don't think Sanderson understands that. I don't think he gets it. This is their gang. It's like my brother. My brother used to beat the shit out of me every day because he was older than me. But if someone else tried to, he'd be like, "No, that I can do that. You can't
mm-hmm,
do that."
mm-hmm.
And he would beat the shit out of them. So that's how these things work. She can berate Matt all day and pull his ear and pinch his,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But somebody else does it. No, 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 no. That's my job. You don't know him like I do, so you don't know when to do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Last bit on this chapter. Um, I love the moment Min has at the very end here where she surprises even Cadsuin, who should know, one of Cadsuin's blind spots is um because she's so old and because she knows how much experience and how much smart she has a bad habit of um underestimating people. And she's been around Min long enough now that she shouldn't be surprised when Min makes this point that no one else is thinking, which is, no, you're wrong. If Rand loses, there is no pattern because the Aes Sedai, or some of the Aes Sedai, are, what are we worried about? We're going to win. We've been quizzing this girl on her visions, and there are visions that clearly happen after the last battle. Um, and this is, this is one of the themes of the whole series from Jordan, and why I like it is how he walks that very thin and fine line between fate and free will. That, okay, well, these are things are all destined to happen by the pattern, but we still have to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
There is no given here. How it happens, why it happens, and to a degree, if it happens, are still up in the air.
The old, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you might be destined to get fat and unhealthy if you don't eat, or if you don't eat correctly and you let it go. It's Yeah, what do we call it? Self fulfilled prophecy.
Mm-hmm. Um, I may be reading too much into this, but I found it interesting that we're,
No, us read too
yes,
much into anything.
skipping ahead to chapter 47 now. So we skip the couple of Egwene chapters. Chapter 46, interestingly, the title is To Be Forged Again, which I wonder if, because we've talked about Egwene and Rand are kind of parallel stories, they're kind of parallel characters. And here in chapter 46, Egwene and the tower she represents are forged again. And then right after that, we get into the one he lost, and it's uh Rand kind of on his way to being forged again. I think this confrontation with Tam is him being dropped into the crucible. And that's what starts to, you know, break up that ore so you can get out the bad bits and have the alloy of the pure metal. Is that confrontation with Tam, I think, is what finally cracks the shell so that he can be forged again as well. And right from the beginning, uh, again, oops, I accidentally crossed the streams here. But what we were talking about last time, what we were talking about Wednesday, was the idea of someone who has the form of a human, but is actually an automaton. And this is one of the thoughts in Rand's head. He had the form of a human, but he was a thing that no human, not even himself, could understand. And he starts to think, well, this is the way it has to be, because the dragon reborn is a symbol, a myth, uh, more than a king, an emperor. All of these things, these titles have to be more than a human. This can't be a human. But next page, 729, um, where is it? A voice deep down, one not in his head, but in his heart, had begun to disagree with what he did. And this is where I think you know, really brought home the point with uh um the analogy I was using was Blade Runner and Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. And what that is all about is to Dick, empathy was when you distilled everything down. Empathy is what separated humans from other animals and humans from machines. And that's why Decker, the Harrison Ford character, is giving an empathy test to see if this is an android or a human. But you added to that, there also has to be consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, and I think also use the word self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness and self-awareness, and because empathy is only a part. You can't be aware of someone else unless you're aware of yourself, because you have nothing to draw on. So if I'm reading your emotions, but I have no emotion myself, what am I learning from it? This
Mm-hmm.
is the way psychopaths work, right? They read your emotions and all they see is tools. That's why they're so manipulative. That's why they use them so well. That's why they're so good at it. They don't actually feel your emotions, which would
Mm-hmm.
be empathy, because they don't have them themselves. All they know is how you react to things.
Mm-hmm.
So now I can control what things I use to control your reactions, which in turn controls you. The other, with empathetic, if I started to use that emotion, I would feel it myself and I would have guilt.
And that is Decker, the character at the beginning of the movie. He can pass the empathy test. He knows all the answers, but he's dead inside. He can't act on it. And that's the growth of the character through the movie. That's the growth of Rand through these chapters, is that, yeah, that voice is there, but he doesn't understand it, and he can't or won't or both act on it.
Well, I would say he doesn't want to to acknowledge it. He
That's a
understands
good
it.
point.
He just doesn't want that understanding to bubble up because he knows it will get in the way, which is actually true. He is right. The problem is getting in the way of his idea of what should happen
Mm-hmm.
versus getting in the way of what should happen.
Speaking of reading too much into it, a couple pages later, I've always, through the whole series, especially when Jordan does it, there are these moments where Luce Theron is suddenly lucid, where when he's not raving, and those are always very interesting. And there's one that happens here that I think Rand is treating it separately, but I think the point is it's not, which is um Rand is the code and call has become his fidget spinner, and he keeps messing with it. And Luce Theron thinks, I told them, Luce Theron whispered. Told them what? Rand demanded. That the plan would not work, Luce Theron said, voice very soft. That brute force would not contain him. They called my plan brash, but these weapons they created, they were too dangerous, too frightening. No man should hold such power. He is clearly being lucid here. And this is, I think, to your point, the last gasp of Rand's humanity. And this is Luz Theron trying to push through. What Rand is doing is brute forcing his humanity away. He's attempting to brute force it away. And it's, I think that's why Luz Theron suddenly pipes up here that this is more than just information. This is an analogy to Rand that we cannot keep on like this. And then, a couple pages later, I think this is Luz Theron driving the point home further when Rand is thinking about Kalendor and that fighting the that blah blah blah. Where is it? Oh yeah. So he's thinking about Kalendor, and that was his first failure. Fighting the Sanshin wasn't our first failure, Luz Theron whispered. No, our first failure happened here in this hallway. This is on page 733, and he's accidentally, or perhaps through Luz Theron in the back of his mind, influencing his steps, he has come to the hallway where he tried to raise that dead girl to life. And that was something that shocked Rand then and still can influence Rand even now, with Luz Theron pointing that out of that wasn't our first failure. Our first failure happened way before that, right here when we tried to brute force humanity, and that's not how humanity works. And then the very next page, boom, there's Tam. There's Tam Al Thor all of a sudden, and it kind of smacks him like he's run into a brick wall. And I was actually looking for my copy of The Eye of the World, and I forgot I gave it to my daughter, so she's at school and she has it, so that she can read it. But I wanted to that opening where you first get a description of Tam from Rand's point of view at the very beginning of the series in chapter 1, and it's not just the physical description. This is what makes the characters so real so quickly, is that point of view, because Jordan isn't just telling us what Tam looks like, he's telling us how Rand feels looking across Bella, looking across over at his father, and it suddenly makes him feel more solid.
You know how I always pictured him? But this could also work for Gareth Bryan, which is kind of fitting because they both are described similarly.
Mm-hmm.
Is the lead the, in Gladiator, the guy who is instructing Maximus,
Oh, the guy that runs the school?
the guy that runs the school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he's that sturdy looking guy with a big old chin and yeah.
Yeah, I'm brain farting on his name, but that was his last movie, I believe, because the actor died shortly after,
Oh, I
and
didn't know that.
it was kind of his big comeback role because it was his first big role in a long time. Um, and
Yeah, but he's that very strong looking kind
mhm,
of gruff, but then pulls off the wisdom
yes.
super well, and so that I think that would have worked perfect for Tam and or Gareth Bryan.
Well, and then on 734 here, that dives right into the point that is the reason Tam is so important, is because Tam had always seemed more solid than the world around him. Not because he was strong. And then Rand thinks about, I've met plenty of people that are stronger than Tam. How many of the literal giant 7 foot tall freaking Aiel? But because Tam was real. And that's why I wanted to think back to the first scene you meet him, and the the weather is bothering Rand, not just because the wind is blowing and it's cold and that's annoying, but it's unnerving because winter's holding on too long. and there's all this stuff that's on his mind, and then he just looks over at Tam, and Tam is solid, as if all this other stuff, nope, not gonna bother me. I'm I'm taking my brandy and my cider to town, and that's that. So
He died during the filming of Gladiator.
okay.
He died trying to outdrink a bunch of sailors.
Well, that is just glorious.
Yeah,
Here's one to you, sir.
Ridley Scott says Oliver Reed dropped down dead after challenging sailors to drinking match while filming Gladiator.
Wow.
All right. Well, Oliver Reed was who I was talking about, but apparently not available for filming in the Wheel of
Yeah.
Time cast. So,
Well, that is one of the few things about the series I liked. It's because now when I read this, I see that actor
mhm.
because he
One
had
of the
such a
best hires they had. Yeah.
perfect look, but more importantly, the perfect demeanor to be the wise, solid, middle-aged to older guy. And this is, my dad can beat up your dad. You know, why? Because, well, I think I've talked about this before. I've never been to New England. I wear a Boston Red Sox hat. Why? Because when I was about 10 years old, my grandpa explained to me why Ted Williams was the greatest baseball player ever. And when you're 10 years old, you're, it felt weird uh when we were away, stationed in Germany, and he couldn't come visit us like he did when we were stationed in Hawaii. And so coming back, having gone through a growth spurt, and all of a sudden seeing Paul, it was so weird because I always felt like Paul was 6.5 feet tall. And how am I now as tall or almost as tall as my grandfather? That doesn't make any sense, because when you're 10, your perception is, oh, he's 6.5 feet tall. He's solid. We're out in the garden and he's out working me and my brother, you know? And it's that solidness that comes from experience. Everything is still new and weird, but this guy, he's been around the block more than once or twice. And that's where that comfort comes from. But as Rand thinks, he has this thought here as he's looking at Tam, and all these emotions are coming over him. But comfort clashed with who Rand had become. His worlds met, the person he had been, the person he had become, like a jet of water on a white hot stone, one shattering, the other turning to steam. And then he has this thought of, and the part of the conflict is, Tam was just the man who had found Rand on the slopes of Dragon Mount. He wasn't his father. That's not my father. And we had seen a long time ago, and I think we pointed this out, where part of the point where Rand really starts to decline is that point where he gives up on that, what he considers the childish idea that somehow I'll find out that Tam really is my real father. And that's the thought he's having here of just the man who found Rand. But then that other part of him kind of steps in here, just the man who had raised him, just the man who had taught him everything he knew, just the man Rand loved and revered and always would, no matter what their blood connection. So there still is that element there, um, that recognizes that calling Tam just the man who found Rand on the slopes of Dragonmont, that's sticking your head up the butcher's ass kind of talk.
It's like calling women people who possess uteruses. It- it's a little bit
Yeah.
disrespectful.
Yeah. And I think these two short paragraphs here, they sum up that inner conflict of who Rand really is versus who the angry childlike Rand thinks he has to be. And Tam just very calmly and smoothly breaks all that down. Um, you know, um, where is it? Yeah, so he's still having that fight. So on the next page, 736, the Dragon Reborn couldn't have a father. A father would be a weakness to be exploited, even more than a woman like Min. Um, Lovers were expected, but the Dragon Reborn had to be a figure of myth, a creature nearly as large as the pattern itself. He had difficulty getting people to obey as it was. What would it do if it were known that he kept his father nearby? If it were known that the Dragon Reborn relied upon the strength of a shepherd?
It's funny. I was just listening to Ian McGilchrist, who's the master and his emissary up there. He's talking about the left brain, and the left brain is very highly associated with hubris and trying to, like I said earlier, trying to make the world everything, trying to control the world around you because you already have it right in your head. And in fact, I would like to
Mm-hmm.
see follow-ups on Dunning-Kruger on if it's actually more a left brain thing than a lack of knowledge thing. Because even if you know 90%, if you if you have hubris, that 90% in your own head is 100%. But what he was talking about also is it's very highly associated with narcissism and anger. And Rand is trying to force the world into what he thinks it should be
Mm-hmm.
because I know who I am and I know the prophecies. I know everything I need to know, and this is how it has to be. And that's actually the biggest downfall of Rand going forward. It has nothing to do with anger or anything like that. It's the hubris that goes with it. And what you just said is what you just said is very narcissistic. I have to be bigger than life. I have to be this thing. Me. Everything depends on me, but I am also everything.
Mm-hmm. And then the voice of wisdom, the guy who's been around the block, the guy who has had, you know, not just been through similar things, but then has had the years to reflect on those things. That's where Tam's voice of wisdom is coming from. It's not just that, as he says in part of this conversation, you know, I fought in wars against Tyr. I should, so there should be some resentment or some awkwardness, but I've had decades to reflect on it, and it's just the way of the world. And so, you know, in much the same way that after decades of reflection, veterans have gone to Japan or gone to Vietnam, you know, because they've had that time to reflect, and now they just want to go back and see the places where they and their brethren once trod, and so that animosity, that emotion is gone, and has been replaced by wisdom. And he tells Rand, the choice isn't always about what you do, son, but why you do it. So he's giving Tam the same lecture, the same talking point that he's given to several people that we've pointed out in this book and even the previous one of, I don't have any choices. The pattern has me in a box. The pattern has me in a box. And Tam's the one that finally tells him, son, that's just nonsense.
Mhm.
That's What does it matter if you could run if you wouldn't? And we all know you wouldn't. And then the point he makes about, hey, look, I was a soldier and I saw plenty of different kinds of soldiers. And, I love the way he phrases it of the man who died fighting for loyalty versus the man who died just for fighting with coin, fighting for coin, the mercenary. Yeah, they're both dead, but that difference is a world of difference, both to those men and to the ones they left behind. Um, I'm not sure how to feel about the way the chapter ends here. To me, it seems a little hokey because it's Rand gets almost cartoonishly villainous here. Um, but I don't know how, so I certainly don't know how I would have written it any different. And we have talked before about there's a difference between realizing you have a problem and realizing, oh, I really need to stop digging this hole and start trying to climb out. And so, yeah, Tam cracked that shell, but it's not like Rand is suddenly going to go, "Oh, geez, you're right. Let's change right now." I mean, he still has to go through a process.
Hmm. Well, this is just like your little cartoon. All of these things happened, and then a miracle, and here we are.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Um, I I don't have a ton of notes on the next on chapter 48, except I do like how we immediately shift to Min's point of view because uh I think what Jordan was trying to tell us the last couple of books, but perhaps especially in uh, Winter's Heart and Knife of Dreams, is that Min gets it. She instinctively, consciously and unconsciously, both perhaps, she's already understood what the lesson that Tam is teaching. Now, she doesn't know how to teach that to Rand, but I think she gets it because there's a resignation there about having tied herself to Rand, so to speak. But she made her choice, and her demeanor is so much different because the why matters. Yes, she grumbles and complains in a lot of ways like Matt does, but she still is going to do the right thing as she sees it. And though she grumbles and complains, she knows, like Tam was saying, yeah, she could run, but she won't ever.
Mhm.
And that matters. The reason she tied herself to Rand, the reason she is working so hard to try and come up with something to help Rand matters. Um,
I want to
I also
I want to drop back a little bit to the end of the
okay.
chapter. One thing I think that's important to point out here is the inner dialogue with Lews Therin as he's about to do what he's going to do. Notice that all the real mad points earlier where Rand loses complete control. Earlier in the books, it was Lews Therin trying to take the power.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Here, he's doing his thing and he's talking to Lews Therin as he's doing it. And Lews Therin's like, "Yeah, you do you."
He's the soft voice of reason.
Yeah.
He's the what am I doing, Rand thought, no more than I've done before.
Hmm.
Um, that's a good point also because no more than I've done before. Um, the next time we get to Rand's point of view, the eye is gone. Rand suddenly starts talking to Lews Therin, but there's this subtle shift uh in the text that is used that Rand is shouting at himself, and he doesn't even realize it. But Sanderson suddenly shifts that, you know, basically, Rand yells at Lews Therin, and then Rand answers back. So that wall has been broken down. Rand just doesn't see it because he's so full of nihilistic emotion.
Hmm.
Um, there is something I just kind of want to put a pin in, and we'll come back to it later because it is minor spoilerish perhaps. Is I think the bit here about the three shall become one. I think that I'm wondering if that is supposed to be not part of the Calendar thing and is a hint or a tease about what happens at the very, very end that is still rather mysterious. And I've never seen a good explanation for how what happens is all I'll say about the
Yeah,
three
yeah.
becoming one.
And I think you're right on that, the latter point there.
And so I think that may be two connected but separate thoughts about Calendor and the three becoming one. Anyway, but what I really love is the end of the chapter here when Tam comes barging in. Um, and uh he is rightfully pissed. You know, anger, like violence, is a tool. Yes, it is very often a tool used for ill, but it doesn't have to be. And Tam, this is, I think, the personification of righteous anger is, what the hell did you do to my son? And so he's right to be angry. And then he's also right. Uh, oh boy, where is it? Um, yeah. I have done nothing to the boy other than to encourage him towards civility, something it seems other members of his family could learn as well. Watch your tongue, Aes Sedai, Tam snarled. That's one of my favorite lines in the whole series because it's so appropriate, both for the character and for the moment, and for as strong a character as Cadsuinin is. Like all the characters, she's not perfect. That's what makes all the characters so good. And finally, someone has come along who is not going to be cowed by Cadsuin's 300 years of Aes Sedai living.
Yeah, let me translate her words in a way that gets us canceled. So starting with Tam, what have you done to him? Cadsuane lowered her book. I have done nothing to the boy but try to change him.
Yes. No,
And it seems
exactly.
like you need to be changed as well.
Yeah.
That is
And
that is the direct translation of that.
and all right, so skipping down a little bit and now this is from Min's point of view. Remember that she's the one watching this. And so I love Tam took a deep breath and the anger seemed to suddenly flow out of him. He was still firm, his eyes displeased, but the rage was gone.
Which we know he was probably embracing the void.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Min had seen Rand take control of himself that quickly before things had started to go wrong in Bandar Eben. He tried to kill me, Tam said in a level voice. My own son. Once he was as gentle and faithful a lad as a father could hope for. Tonight, he channeled the one power and turned it against me. Um, and then down a little lower, where is it? Somewhere in here, he makes the point of I've seen men with that look in their eyes before, and it always ended up with one of us on the ground bleeding. So he ain't just whistling Dixie here. He has literally been eye to eye with men who wanted to kill him before and had to defend himself. He knows what that look means. Um and Cadsuin is still being kind of catty here. So um uh
Well, I
and
like that he confronts her as the bully too.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
she grabs him with air and Nynaeve, being Nynaeve, Cadsuin, you don't need to. It's all right, Wisdom, Tam said. He looked at Cadsuin. Min had seen her treat others like this, including Rand. He had always grown frustrated, and others she did it to were prone to bellowing. Tam stared her in the eyes. I've known men who, when channeled, always turn to their fist for answers. I've never liked Aes Sedai. I was happy to be rid of them when I returned to my farm. A bully is a bully, whether he uses the strength of her arm, or other means. Cadsuin snorted, but the words had irked her, for she set Tam down. Because for all her faults, she's still strong enough for the most part to admit when she's wrong. That's one of the things that makes her a stronger person than so many of the other characters, is she's not necessarily going to show it. She's not necessarily going to admit it out loud, but we have seen her in a couple of the times where we've actually gotten a point of view from her where she's clearly rethinking, where she's clearly reevaluating, where she's clearly going, crap, I think I've messed up here.
Yeah, and this is Scott will love this because this is kind of our beef about Aes Sedai in general. Uh, is Jordan understood, and I almost think Sanderson would have pulled back if he understood what Jordan was getting at here. This is what the people with a XX chromosome who possess XX chromosomes would do with power that is similar to that of the people who have the XY chromosome, right? Everybody is going to divert to the common denominator, or every group of people will divert to the common denominator. And this is a testament to, no, look how somebody will use something when they have the advantage, if they are the bully.
If you want a very real and terrible historical example of that, go find one of the videos or articles talking about the Woman King movie and the real history of that tribe and how gross it was. And why so many people, including quite a few number of Africans, were pissed off that they turned this tribe into heroes. Because no, there was this tribe with this female army. They were not good people. Not at all.
Come on, actual real Africans don't count in the social justice debate.
That's true.
Yeah.
Um, da, da, da,
Otherwise,
da.
we wouldn't combine it with the climate debate. But
But we digress.
yeah.
But don't worry, Min distills it down to the real point here, which I love because this is why she's here, which is Nynaeve, Cadsuin, Tam, all going round and round, arguing with each other, yelling at each other. And Min is the one who shuts everybody up with, this is what we all get for assuming we can make him do what we want,
Mm-hmm.
rather than helping him, guiding him, counseling him. Hell, just being there for him when he has to go through that's where Min is really so important. That's I mean, back to where their relationship started was just sitting on his lap and being held because he needed some human connection, because he was going through some really rough and he needed that human connection, and there wasn't anywhere else he could reliably get it from. And in a lot of ways, that's what Tam was trying to reestablish, was that human connection, that father-son connection. But Cadsuin, yes, inadvertently, but still, she kind of should have known better. She really poisoned the well. And that's what Tam is so pissed off about, is if I had known how bad things were, if I had known what you had been doing and what he thought about you, I would not have said what I said. I would have taken a much different tact. And he's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Luckily, there is still that kernel of Rand there. And I think,
Well, with
right.
Katsuin, it's an awareness thing because the well was poisoned because of how Elsa basically planted the evidence in in uh, uh, in the Simmer Edge situation.
Mm-hmm,
The well was poisoned by the box,
mm-hmm.
and Cadsuin was correct that the box was in her way of developing the relationship she needed, but she didn't adjust properly.
Yeah.
She still tried to control the situation with her sense of her forceful nature. And that's why I think Cerelia should have been a better voice for her, because Cerelia has a forceful nature, but she understood when to be soft.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So, but because of her own hubris, Cadsuane could not understand how the manipulation of Elsa and Semiraj affected her relationship. So she still tried to do the same thing, just from a different angle, instead of understanding that, oh, this actually has a permanent effect on him. She was thinking this has an effect on my job. No, this is an effect on him. He's a human too, remember?
Hmm.
Remember that?
Hmm.
He's a person too. And she lost sight of that.
Um, I think right at the beginning of chapter 49, page 750, I think this is a great line of where that Rand's humanity isn't completely gone and where his state of mind is and why he's so broken is Rand's rage was gone, replaced by loathing. I mean, we've gone beyond shame here. That's a step beyond. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, you're saying self-loathing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he goes through, he thinks through what he had just done, and I'm so freaking awful. But he's still trying to use it to, I'm going to use that awfulness, I'm going to use that self-flagellation to harden myself to go into Ibudar and start raining literal fire and lightning down on the Sanshin. I'm going to destroy them. Um, but 752, as he's walking through the city, as he's thinking about what he's going to do and how he's going to do it, um, Luce Theron whispers, "It will be a mercy. Death is always a mercy." The madman didn't sound as crazy as he once had. In fact, his voice had started to sound an awful lot like Rand's own voice. So I think this is um I'm wondering if in order for Rand to merge with Luce Theron, if the whole point here was to drive Rand to that point, to where Luce Theron was mentally when he died, so that they can merge. Because Rand has to step into Luce Theron's shoes to stop viewing him as this other person. No, no, that was you. You did that. It's this. You're the same person.
Except that the fact the moment he died was his moment of clarity.
It, clarity, but still racked with the guilt, the shame, the pain. The clarity made it worse in some ways because he knew what he had done.
Mm-hmm.
And the that is where I think you can look back and think, the madness of Luce Theron, the raving madman. I that wasn't, and this isn't an original thought. People way back in the old days on the message boards would make this point that Luce Theron isn't mad because of the taint. He was given clarity right before he died. He is legitimately, you know, unsupernaturally crazy because of the terrible things he did. He drove himself insane. The
Well,
clarity of that drove him. That's why he's mad.
yeah, well, and that, now we're talking about we're defining insanity, because if you really think about it now, is all this crying for Ilyana and the sobbing in the background. That's that's not a mad thought. That I mean, if I woke up one morning and I had gotten blackout drunk, where I can't remember a thing, but it was very obviously evident that while I was in that state, I killed everybody in the house. That wouldn't drive me mad if I was to be so regretful of that I killed myself. Regret is not madness.
It's a good point.
Guilt is not madness. So Luce Theron was never mad at all. And what we see in some of Luce Theron's what seems like his mad moments, I'll bring one example: kill tame, kill tame, kill tame. That's paranoia. That was
Mhm.
Rand's own paranoia manifesting in a voice.
You know what it suddenly makes me think of, and it just kind of dawned on me, is uh listening to um veterans on some of the channels I watch talking about mental health, talking about their own struggles. And one of the points, paraphrasing, that a lot of them make is, hey, you're not crazy because you're struggling. That's normal considering what we went through. PTSD is not insanity. That is a completely normal human reaction to the kind of stuff we went through. Luce Theron's not insane. He has severe PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Severe PTSD because of how horrible the things he did were. And the fact that he knows he couldn't help himself doesn't help, because
Yeah,
those people are still dead and I still did it.
and see, so that again, yeah, let's define insanity. Insanity is a detachment from reality. He was detached from reality when he killed everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He was not detached from reality when he was made aware of it. And all the sobs and everything we get from Luce Theron in Rand's head are attached to reality.
Mm-hmm.
Rand is detaching himself from reality.
And that's why a lot of the conversation about when Luce Theron's voice first shows up, and a lot of the conversation on the message boards about what is this, who is this, is one of the theories was it was a construct of Rand's in order to cope with what is happening, what he has to go through. That 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 was a break from reality in a sense, because Rand couldn't deal with all that had been thrust upon this poor shepherd boy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Well,
but
yeah, yeah. That go back to the tame example. That paranoia is actually well founded because you have a guy whose biggest concern was something coming after one of your sheep for a long period of time, his entire life. A long period of time, his entire life. A year and a half later ish, he's talking face to face with probably one of the most dangerous men in the world.
mhm.
A little bit of paranoia that he needs to die is probably healthy.
That whatever the cause, whether there was a break or whether that was just the natural whatever of the soul in the previous lives, it is important, I think, that on the very last page of this chapter, on page 754, this I was referencing this earlier, when he travels to Dragon Mount, he thinks in his head, why have we come here? Rand thought. Because Rand replied, because we made this. This is where we died. So he's finally going to be able to become a whole person, because however it happened, he has finally stopped forcing the voice to be a separate entity. He is finally recognizing, this is who I am. This part of me that I don't like is still me.
Which rewind back to Cadsuin saying you hear voices, boy, and the progression of madness in all of these people that can channel. This might be the secret is to realize, oh, that voice is me. Whereas to actually go crazy is to keep treating the voice like it's something else. That's being detached from reality. He's saying, oh, this voice is me. Now we're back in the real world.
All right. Well, before we get to Rand's quick climax uh, that we spent way too long laughing about and last time as compared to Egwene's multiple climaxes, there is something that jumped out at me on the previous page, page 753, that made me go, hmm. So when he grabs hold of Sidon, because he's going to start raining fire down on the Sanshin, and one of the things that pulls him back from the brink, I mean, he's already kind of struggling there, but one of the last little, you know, straws that breaks the back there is seeing all the genuine concern on the faces of people around him, because when he sees his Sidon, um where is it, the sickness washed across him more powerfully than it ever had before. I mean, it physically knocks him down to the ground and makes him start vomiting. And there's so much genuine concern for, are you okay, that he can't face the humanity of these people because of his own inhumanity, and he flees. So that's kind of, I guess, the first order surface level of what's going on here. But the deeper thought that made me scratch my head was, why here and now? Um what is it? And this made me wonder, is it the link with Moradin that was causing the sickness? Was it the wounds on his side? What, I think this is a clue as to what was causing the sickness and why. And it made me wonder, was it that link? Uh, why is it stronger here? And it made me wonder, was the sickness Rand's true nature battling the influence of Alon, the nihilist philosopher, and that connection, that kind of merging of the two of their persons? Is that what the sickness was a physical manifestation of his true nature battling against Moradin Ishamel Alon, the nihilist, who had been tempting Rand over to, no, come to the dark side because everything is pointless. So why keep fighting? Why keep fighting for the light? Which is ultimately what chapter 50 is all about, is
So,
why the hell
so
am I doing this?
basically a metaphysical pathogen.
Yeah.
Hmm. I have to think on that one.
So, uh, Scott, what are your thoughts? Our other followers along, I can't remember the name of our first time reader who's following along whenever you get here.
Oh,
Um,
something is isomorphic.
yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the sickness? And I haven't found, any posts, any theories, essays on the sickness that mention this. But it's kind of hard to go back and search now because you keep finding, you know, modern, wiki page stuff. But the deep dive giant dorks like us that used to hang around message boards and forums, most of those seem to have died out around 2012. And so it's hard to go back and find some of the deep dives. But I'll have to see what I can find on Rand's sickness, and if anyone connects this scene here with that, and what does that possibly mean. Um, all right, so let's go ahead and tug one out here. with Rand. Um, I'm not sure how I feel about this chapter. Um, in a lot of
I found a
ways,
whole thread on the sickness on Theoryland, so I'll
okay,
I'll I'll keep that up so we can maybe open up with it on the next one when we do the prologue of the next
okay,
book.
yeah, because there's some overlap there. But he was angry is like the first line on uh uh page 756 is he sits down at the top of the Dragon Mountain. He's trying to think. He's trying to think his way through all this, and he's angry, which immediately made me think of the great line from Last Airbender that I referenced a while ago, where the wise old mentor says, "Shame is not the opposite of anger, but its source." And at the time I was watching, I was like, "Oh man, how has that line never hit me in the previous times I've watched this series?" But that really stood out this time around when I watched it, and in it may have been because of our reread here of where we were with Rand's storyline. I was like, man, that really speaks to Rand
Well,
and
it's
his
not the
temper.
amygdala because fear can cause aggression, but we know from our case study SM, who has no amygdalas and feels no fear, she can still get angry. So anger comes from somewhere else, and that we don't know.
But there certainly seems to, with Rand, be this connection to this self-loathing, this the fact that he can never see that's why I wanted to point out there in that first bit from Rand's point of view where he can't see the colors. He can only see the stains. He can only see the rips in the clothing. He cannot see the half full side of the glass. It's all empty. That's he's fixated on that. And that I think is where his temper comes from. Uh, is that frustration with himself primarily. He lashes out because he's frustrated at these things that other people do, but that just feeds the negative feedback loop inside himself of his own self-loathing, which in a kind of childlike way he lashes out at the pattern. He lashes out at the world itself. There's still, I think, I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but this is Rand, the young man, finally becoming a man, finally setting aside childish things. You occasionally see hints of Jordan's Christianity in some of the themes and the imagery in the Wheel of Time, but not a ton of it. But I wonder if Sanderson more so, since he's the one actually writing this scene. It makes me wonder if there's a purposeful uh, allusion here to I can't remember which letter it is when Paul says, you know, when I was a child, I thought like a child, but I have put aside childish things. Um, and in a sense, I think that is what is happening with Rand here. I think that's the kind of literary device, for lack of a better word. Um, and so he rages at the world itself, and he says, "What if I don't want the pattern to continue?" And this is where this is where I was starting to connect back with the sickness and wondering, as we've pondered, but this is you know echoing his that conversation he had with Moradin in that dream world that didn't seem to actually be the world of dreams, you know, where they had that little conversation, and that was Moradin's point. Why what's the point? Why you keep doing this? We have done this for time immemorial, and we're going to keep doing it. Why stop it? I'm not sure I like the resolution. My note on this, where is it? None of this matters. On 757 he's shouting.
Mhm.
Okay, and then on 759, lose Theron's voice that's now his own voice. He's finally started recognizing it, sort of started to recognize it as his own voice. comes up with the reason. And my note on page 759 is this is extra sharp Vermont cheddar, man.
Yeah.
My my favorite kind of cheese, but not necessarily the metaphorical cheese.
Yeah, this is Luke Skywalker screaming why after losing his hand. It's no. Yeah. It, I don't know where with the way the story was going though, I don't know what you do with this other than this.
Yeah. I just and I think this is, you know, whatever notes there were or how much of this was just Sanderson seeing the steps Jordan was taking to how Rand would avoid falling into the trap of Mord and falling to the darkness.
Hmm.
I mean, it is the second chances. It is the yes, we lose, but we also get to love. It's just written so clunky.
Hmm. I almost wonder if it would have been different had Moradin been in this scene.
Hmm. There's an interesting thought.
The hard part of that is you've mentioned before the end of the book was written
Hmm.
before the rest of the books. And how do you have Morden at the end but have him in this scene? That's a little complicated. But the scene without Morden, I think.
Given their connection and given that he sometimes sees his face, and I think there have been times where that face came up when he grabbed the power, and
Mhm,
he is wielding way more of the power than it has ever been wielded by anyone ever before. I mean, he thinks he's actually drawing more than he did when he cleansed Sidon, which that's a lot, right? I mean, he's literally about to try and destroy the world, crack it like an egg, which he thinks more than once before this scene. He or Luce Theron has the thought that yeah, he could do it. That the code and call is that powerful. He could literally break the world. Not like it was in the breaking where the world still survived, but no, like you know, Alderaan kaboom.
well, and there's another element here, and I wonder how Jordan would have written it, because this may have been in the notes planned. And I could let me explain this if the best I can. Jordan was a man who, yeah, had a comfortable life in the end,
Mm-hmm.
but he also had been to war. He also had a normal, childhood that wasn't, silver spoon in hand, you know. But Sanderson, he very much a upper middle class, spoiled by his parents. I probably an oldie child by the way he acts. I would actually, I don't know that, but I might want to put money on that he was an only child.
Well, I
And
doubt it because he's Mormon, but
oh, never mind. I'm not going to put money there. But yeah, just the way he acts, he doesn't understand the nature of what would cause you to have an inner fight.
hmm.
He just knows, I want this. This is me now.
You know that's a good point, and because to his credit, you know, pe- to his credit, to the point where people make jokes about it, is the guy can't stop writing. He is ludicrously prolific, and that I mean, I would go so far as a literary savant with how quickly he is able to write a tome. I mean, like I said, his style doesn't do it for me, and I've only read a few of his books, but I know people who read everything he writes, and he writes a ton. And to be able to lay out a work of fiction that has ups and downs and twists and turns, and then get it down on the page as quickly as he does, and he's been doing it for since an early age.
Well,
So,
dopamine's a wonderful thing, and it's like the literary version of Instagram likes. You got to keep creating content, my friend. Got to keep creating content because eventually the likes start to drop off in the last one.
mhm,
And those kind of people never create legends because they're constantly creating content. Jordan had a big plan.
mhm,
Sanderson just got to finish it.
mhm,
But
yeah,
yeah, it's something that I think was in the notes, was probably what it was supposed to be, but but was put in the notes by a person who knows what inner struggle is and what it is to fight the demons
Hmm.
and what it and actually the downfall of trying to be overly stoic about everything. You know, the Marcus Aurelius crowd out there that they don't even they fight more than anybody else. I'm like, you call yourself stoic, but y'all are always fighting. It doesn't make any sense to me. But to understand the yin and yang of emotion and reason, the elephant and its rider. This is the fight of the elephant finally saying "fuck you, rider," and he doesn't understand that. I did put the right book up, Happiness
There,
Hypothesis.
there's a there's one line in the epilogue I want to look at, on page 762, because I think this is purposely connecting these events. And that's why I referenced it before back in Knife of Dreams, where Egwene, she knew kind of intellectually what the IO meant by embrace the pain, but she really learns the lesson after her capture and in Knife of Dreams. And she's sitting down in the Amarillan study, and there's this and so she has this thought about how sparse the decorations are because everything that was Elida's has been removed. True, it reminded her just a little too much of the study of the Mistress of Novices, but no number of wall hangings would banish her memory of those days, not when Sylviana herself was Egwene's keeper. That was fine. Why would Egwene want to banish those days? They contained some of her most satisfying victories. Though she certainly didn't mind being able to sit without cringing. I think there's
I long
a
for that
purpose
day again.
a purposeful connection there of um Egwene had to learn how to embrace the pain literally, physically, and when she did, she triumphed. And as physically painful as that was, she doesn't want to lose those memories because those were satisfying victories. Rand had to learn how to embrace the existential pain, the emotional pain, because he's a guy. So dealing with the physical wounds and that constant pain, he just ignores it and he keeps pushing on. That's the easy part for him as a man. The existential pain, the I've used this example before of having to put the dog down and knowing how much your wife and kids are hurting because you're losing this family member. And the worst part is you can't do anything about it. That's what hurts a man. It's not for the wife and kids, it is the moment. It is the loss of this family member, this dog that's been around as long as the youngest child has. Okay. But for the man, that for the father figure, it's their pain and not being able to do anything about it. And being able to come to terms with that and live with it. That's the embracing the pain that Rand had to learn. And I think maybe that's where it feels hokey and cheesy at the end, is because I think that's I don't think that's the message you get with the way Sanderson reaches that conclusion. And maybe that's why the moment isn't as satisfying as if you look back on the whole road. Then the whole road, Rand's whole journey, I think, is satisfying when you think about it in those terms. It's just the moment wasn't as satisfying.
Well, and I think this is where a lot of stoicists miss the point is emotions aren't your enemy. I think I've said this. I don't know if it was in a Wheel of Time episode or a social episode, but I know I've said it in this podcast before. There is no such thing as a bad emotion.
Mm,
Anger is not a bad emotion. Anger helps you deal with narcissistic pricks that threaten your tribe, right? Fear is not a bad emotion. Fear keeps you freaking alive. Uh, Depression in itself is not a bad emotion because you should be sad when bad things happen.
mm,
Uh, it's when they're hijacked to the point that they're no longer pro survival that it becomes a problem. And he led a few instances where he was hijacked. Uh, Help him form an opinion that they're all bad.
mm.
All emotions are bad.
That's a good
And
point.
that came in extrinsically. That was from influence from Moradin. That was from influence from land. That was from influence from all of these other places. You can't have these emotions because they get in the way of the goals. No, a little bit of anger when you fight is good. The whole I need to get rid of all anger, or I'm going to make a mistake. No, a little bit's good because that adds power.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it, partly because I've got 1 minute
You
before
have
my
to, yeah,
alarm
you
goes
have
off
to go.
here, but also because that's a tease into the next book, because while the moment here wasn't as satisfying, I do think Sanderson does a good job of showing that when we see the new Rand, the whole Rand, and the way he acts and reacts to people, the way he deals with his emotions is a much healthier whole person kind of thing. And also because we're about to see the moment that we were just griping about from Perrin's point of view in the next book. And so we can talk about it more there since we see it again.
Well, and
Uh,
also I've been holding this meme since the beginning, and we finally can use it.
as all things should be.
As all
All
things
right.
should be.
Well, then we will see y'all next time to discuss something, probably something awful, because it'll be next Wednesday.
Yep. All right. See you later, guys.